the movie. Nothing like browsing the toy aisles for some key movie spoilers. All those cash cow products are finally worth something. Well, the new figures for characters like Rocket, Thor, and Captain America refer to a, quote, greater threat the team will come against. What could be more powerful than Thanos and his Infinity Gauntlet? Ronan making a big comeback? Nah, just kidding. It has to be someone even greater. Perhaps one of the biggest Marvel villains of all time, Galactus. The cosmic entity could prove to be a major threat to the surviving half of the universe and to all of the heroes we have remaining. It's kind of hard to keep one of the biggest sequels of all time under wraps when you need to do national casting calls to help a big collection of minor roles. For Endgame, the Russo brothers needed a lot of extras, and dressed in their Sunday best. Yep, we're talking about a funeral here. But who exactly is it for? And why are there so many people attending? Well, there's multiple options. An endgame montage could showcase the after effects of the destination, global funerals for those who had to sweep their loved ones up and put the dust inside an urn. A massive funeral may be held near the end of the movie if one of our big heroes like Iron Man or Captain America passes away. The biggest question during these funeral scenes will be who cries more? Let's watch the big extras on the big screen. If the theories are right and comic book history proves to be true, then Endgame will feature Hawkeye like we've never seen him before, transformed into the sword-wielding Ronin. But why would Hawkeye transform into the hero who travels along? Our best bet is the decimation took out his whole family, leaving him bitter, angry, and ready for some Kill Bill swordplay style revenge. The trailer also seems to indicate Black Widow is trying to reel him in to come and finish the fight by teaming up with the remaining Avengers. But who knows how the loose cannon will react after getting placed on house arrest due to the events of Captain America Civil War. During Infinity War, we learned that Thanos' mission was to bring balance to the universe. We assumed that when he snapped his finger, half of the universe was just killed off. But what if Thanos had grander plans in mind? In a sci-fi bending story, what if Thanos actually ripped reality in two, creating a multiverse with two universes which were both evenly split? This may be one of the more far-fetched endgame theories, but it could help explain the return of many of our heroes. The quantum realm could serve as the link between the two worlds, allowing our heroes to come up with a plan to reunite the universes back into one again. Not only would it be great to see what life is like in the second universe, but it could give Thanos a little more humanity for the actions he caused with the powers of the Infinity Gauntlet. Thanos' actions during Infinity War were driven by a mission to help bring balance to the universe. But in the comic books, he also had a deeper motivation. Obviously not love for his daughter Gamora, as he easily sacrificed her, but love in the form of Lady Death. Thanos' ultimate goal in eliminating half of all life was to impress Lady Death and woo her even. Theories have popped up online that Lady Death could make an appearance during Endgame, or at least get mentioned by Thanos as we learn more about his character. While we probably won't get a full-on love song montage, extending the development of the villain will only help increase his depth and motives from the first movie. One of the most epic moments during Infinity War was when Thor flew through the sky and smashed the Stormbreaker axe into the chest of Thanos. The brutal move was great, but Thanos only taunted Thor for his actions, claiming he should have gone for the head as the chest shot still gave the Neptune a chance to snap those fingers together. The line has not only become one of the most memorable moments in the movie, but could lead to one of the biggest chaos in cinematic history. Many theories have pointed to Thor's eventual victory over Thanos, mainly by slicing off the big purple head and rocking the roll to a peaceful death. Thor will not make the same mistake twice. The God of Thunder will most certainly be looking to embark on some boyfriend, I bet he does it kiss ya. He gon' find another girl and he won't miss ya. He gon' spin and hit the club like what's the Lisa. Hit or miss, I guess they never miss, huh? You got a boyfriend, I bet he does it kiss ya. He gon' find another girl and he won't miss ya. He gon' spin and hit the club like what's the Lisa. Hit or miss, I guess they never miss, huh? You got a boyfriend, I bet he does it kiss ya. He gon' find another girl and he won't miss ya. He gon' spin and hit the club like what's the Lisa. Hit or miss, I guess they never miss, huh? You got a boyfriend, I bet he does it kiss ya. miss, huh? You got a boyfriend, I bet he doesn't kiss ya. He gon' find another girl and he won't miss ya. He gon' spend and hit the job like Wiz Khalifa. Hit or miss, I guess they never miss, huh? You got a boyfriend, I bet he doesn't kiss ya. He gon' find another girl and he won't miss ya. He gon' spend and hit the job like Wiz Khalifa. Hit or miss, I guess they never miss, huh? You got a boyfriend, I bet he doesn't kiss ya. He gon' find another girl and he won't miss ya. He gon' spend and hit the job like Wiz Khalifa. Hit or miss, I guess they never miss, huh? You got a boyfriend, I bet he doesn't kiss ya. He gon' find another girl and he won't miss ya. He gon' spend and hit the job like Wiz Khalifa. Hit or miss, I guess they never miss, huh? You got a boyfriend, I bet he doesn't kiss ya. He gon' find another girl and he won't miss ya. He gon' spend and hit the job like Wiz Khalifa. Hit or miss, I guess they never miss, huh? You got a boyfriend, I bet he doesn't kiss ya. He gon' find another girl and he won't miss ya. He gon' spend and hit the job like Wiz Khalifa. Hit or miss, I guess they never miss, huh? You got a boyfriend, I bet he doesn't kiss ya. He gon' find another girl and he won't miss ya. He gon' spend and hit the job like Wiz Khalifa. Hit or miss, I guess they never miss, huh? You got a boyfriend, I bet he doesn't kiss ya. He gon' find another girl and he won't miss ya. He gon' spend and hit the job like Wiz Khalifa. Hit or miss, I guess they never miss, huh? You got a boyfriend, I bet he doesn't kiss ya.
And guided by Tony, so it would make sense that he would help him, even in the afterlife. We're pretty sure Happy Hogan has some tricks up his sleeve to help get this done in case Tony Stark does die due to the events of Endgame. Before we lost hero after hero during the closing moments of Infinity War, MCU deaths were mainly relegated to defeated villains. Tony Stark's parents or old age a la Agent Carter. One death which sticks out among them all is Quicksilver. The speedster and brother of the Scarlet Witch met his demise in the Avengers Age of Ultron, but we may see him return for the sequel. The appearance could be a quick flashback cameo, or the resulting shifts in the timeline could reverse his death and allow him to speed to the future. Either way, this time in the MCU was clearly too short-lived, and adding a speedster to the mix is a great way to offer different powers to the character. Now let's see if the protective Big Brother will approve of the Scarlet Witch's relationship with Vision. We've seen Captain America make the ultimate sacrifice for Earth plenty of times. In the first Avenger, he plunged into icy waters. In the Winter Soldier, he plunged into frigid waters. And now with Endgame approaching, expect Captain America to once again put his life on the line. And probably involve some type of water, cold water. All signs are pointing to Captain America's death in the movie. And trailers have shown he's nearly reached his emotional breaking point due to the decimation. Not only may Captain America perish, but someone new may take the role of the Shield. Bucky could honor his longtime friend, or maybe the Falcon will trade in his wings for the red, white, and blue costume. Either way, we imagine the mantle of Captain America will live on in some form. Emily Van Camp's Peggy Carter could even return to mourn for the man in her life. While all the signs point to Captain America's death, theories have stated he won't be the only Avenger falling. It cannot be a coincidence that all of the original Avengers managed to survive the decimation. To help get the return of their friends, the team may reform and decide to create some sort of trade. The original Avengers for the return of everyone else. Of course, we're not sure exactly how this will play out, but Doctor Strange probably has a good idea and knew exactly where the future would lead as his body turned to dust. Transitioning into the next stage of the MCU only makes sense as we bid farewell to our original Avengers and transition into a new era of heroes. But don't worry, in Hollywood everything comes full circle, and there's bound to be some type of Iron Man or Captain America reboot in the future. Man, Thor gets some of the coolest weapons. We were shocked to see the trusty Mjolnir crushed to pieces in Thor Ragnarok, but quickly forgot about that hammer when Thor yielded the Stormbreaker during Infinity War. Could the God of Thunder be back with a bigger and better weapon for Endgame? We certainly hope so. Peter Dinklage signed up for 2 MCU films, and all signs are pointing to Endgame as his second appearance. If Thor returns to visit Eitri, he may seek out an even bigger and better weapon to help destroy Thanos, or other threats coming his way. Thor and the Avengers may also must each read to craft another Infinity Gauntlet as they begin their time-traveling adventures trying to collect some stones from the past. Either way, Thor and giant weapons are always a great time, and we look forward to all of his action scenes. Seeing what a cash cow the Avengers has made for Disney, we imagine the group name and team-up movies aren't going anywhere soon. So expect to see some type of new group form after the veterans have either perished or gone their separate ways. And right now, there are plenty of heroes who could lead the pack right into the next phase of Marvel films. We imagine the new Avengers to consist of heroes like the Black Panther, Ant-Man, the Wasp, the Scarlet Witch, the Falcon, and possibly Captain Marvel. The dynamics of the new group could lead to all new storylines, great moments, and plenty of big screen action to feast upon. Even if we do lose a lot of our favorite heroes, there will be plenty of new ones to cheer on, root for, and celebrate in the future of the MCU. As long as Disney keeps producing those movies, we'll be along for the ride. Avengers Infinity War ended in the most depressing manner. Throughout the film, Thanos was on a crusade with the sole objective of collecting all 6 Infinity Stones. Once collected, he snapped his fingers, and half of all life in the universe was turned to dust in an event called the Decimation. But despite Thanos winning that conflict and being the hero of his own story, did he really complete his mission successfully? Or was it actually a failure? Thanos was a gifted outcast from the planet Titan. It was a rich and prosperous world that was starting to fall victim to overpopulation. Thanos saw the coming calamity and knew something had to be done. He figured that cutting the planet's population in half would be the answer to the problem. By doing this, the surviving citizens would be able to consume the natural resources more liberally, and then they'd live a prosperous and happy life. Of course, he was labeled mad for even suggesting such a plan, and no further action was taken. Nobody wants a genocidal warlord on their city council after all. Thanos was naturally exiled for his beliefs and was left to his own devices, far away from his homeworld Titan. But despite his insane idea, Thanos was right about one thing. The number of resources on the planet was outweighed by the population. You got to see Titan in Infinity War, and it was a derelict and abandoned ruin of a world, which had succumbed to overpopulation and starvation. Thanos became obsessed with the idea of wiping out half of the planet's population in order to save it from itself, and began a crusade of destruction. Everywhere he went, he would wipe out 50% of the native population as if he were playing. What's even more terrifying is that he seemed proud of his work. Thanos states that his genocidal plan worked on Gamora's home planet. He came in with the Chitauri and wiped out half of Gamora's species. Since then, the planet has become a paradise, or so Thanos states. Using that experiment as a launching point, Thanos decided that in order to save the galaxy and the universe, the same method had to be applied. But the only way to kill that many people at once is to use the power of the Infinity Stones, harnessed by a magical gauntlet made by the dwarves. By sheer will and determination, Thanos actually pulls it off and thrusts half of all existence in the universe. Thanos' initial plan paints him as a hero and savior. His plan may have been sinister, but Thanos really did just want the best for the survivors in the long run. After the decimation, the surviving populations would prosper as they wouldn't be fighting over food and other natural resources. But thanks to the Super Bowl teaser trailer, it looks like Thanos may have made one miscalculation that ultimately doomed his mission from the get-go. When he attacked Gamora's planet, he did it with an army, and ultimately split the villages in half and wiped out one of the two groups. But this was a manual effort, and he still had some control over who was to be sacrificed. The same can't be said of the Infinity Stones, which dusted anyone and anything sentient. And by trying to create a perfect utopian universe, Thanos created hell on Earth. And this isn't a theory either, as Marvel Studio head Kevin Feige confirmed in summer 2018 that every life form in the universe, whether it be food or people, were subject to the decimation. So what happens when you press Control-Alt-Delete on the universe? Well, things are going to look pretty crummy. We know this by looking over the footage of the Super Bowl teaser, where we see shots of Earth in ruins. It looks like a zombie apocalypse in some of the shots, with cityscapes and buildings standing in darkness. What's even more is that Thanos didn't take into account population regrowth. So while half of all life on Earth may be done, he really only set Earth back a few decades, or a century at best. So even if his plan was a success, he'd have to continuously redo his plan for all eternity, or pass the quest to someone else to repeat. If all life on Earth did get wiped out, that would explain why things look so awful in the Super Bowl spot. Small things that we take for granted are no longer there. Algae, for example, are a huge source of oxygen on the planet, along with trees. And if half of them are gone, who knows how many people died who have trouble breathing? The shot of New York City shows the skyline in utter darkness, confirming that no one is there to work at the power plants. Perhaps there aren't enough people working, or that grief has paralyzed the population. But if that's the case, those who live on life support systems, for example, may have also died. Clean water may be harder to come by. Sewage may be piling up. So, for all his talk of being the cure for a universe on the brink of collapse, one look at Earth post-decimation would indicate that it was Thanos himself that brought about the apocalyptic reality he was so desperately trying to prevent. So how does this mess help the surviving members of the Avengers? The biggest theory fans have about the plot of Endgame is that they'll be making use of the quantum realm to travel back in time to undo the decimation. Perhaps this means intercepting Thanos from collecting the stones, or going further back in time to create a whole new timeline where Thanos doesn't even get started on his quest. But one thing seems for certain thanks to the plot synopsis for the film. The goal of the Avengers is to undo what Thanos did. But while we're certainly going to get a showdown with the Mad Titan again, using magic and brute strength may not be the cause for his inevitable defeat. In the first teaser trailer, we see a brief shot of Thanos on his farm. It's likely the Mad Titan is completely oblivious to events happening around the universe. He's likely sitting on the steps of his ranch, believing himself to be some kind of unsung savior of the universe. The reality is, he's actually the one responsible for its downfall. Perhaps instead of beating the Mad Titan to a pulp, the Avengers will have to show Thanos the error of his ways, and get him to undo the decimation himself. If they can bring Thanos back to Earth, likely against his will, and show him the wasteland he's created, perhaps he'll realize just how much of a fool he's been, and how utterly moronic his plan actually was. Realizing that sacrificing Gamora led to ruins may be enough for Thanos to change his opinion. With that in mind, it doesn't seem too unreal to imagine that Thanos may end up being an unwilling ally to the Avengers in the upcoming film. Many fans have noticed that some characters seem to have been edited out of the Super Bowl teaser, thanks to some negative space between some of the actors in various shots. The way the internet is seeing it, Marvel digitally removed someone from the roster. Who's not to say that the character that was maybe edited out of those shots wasn't Thanos himself? Once recruited, Thanos would become a mighty, albeit temporary, ally to the cause of undoing what was done. If Thanos learns of how horrible reality has become since the decimation, he may be easily swayed to undo it, perhaps with the hope of trying again. What's more is that if he helps to undo it, Thanos would be the one to bring Gamora back to life, and that would be an interesting and narratively pleasing moment for the villainous lead. We've already seen that this Thanos is very different than his comic book counterpart, so having him embark on a path of redemption after seeing the error of his ways would be a great and unexpected twist. Unlike the comics, the MCU's Thanos is motivated by self-described logic and a precise methodology. He can be reasoned with if enough data is presented to him. In other words, if evidence of his failure is given to him, he'll analyze that information and make a conclusion. This is a far cry from his comic book iteration, which took on the Infinity Quest in order to impress Lady Death herself. How could she not be dazzled by someone who's willing to kill half of all life in the universe? This alone makes Thanos very different, as he initially acted on emotion. Since Death hasn't played a role in the MCU yet, Thanos isn't bound by the constraints of trying to win over her affection, meaning that Thanos is doing everything of his own free will. This alone is a huge departure for the character, and maybe a key element in saving the universe on the big screen. The decimation as we know it also is different than the snap that happened in the original Infinity Gauntlet comic arc that was released in 1991. In the comic run from the early 90s, Thanos snapped his fingers, and, well, you know the story by now. His affections for Lady Death kept going unnoticed, including building a shrine for her, and his rejection caused him to strike out half of the life in the universe in order for her to notice him. But it doesn't take long before that shrine dedicated to Lady Death is replaced by an altar to Thanos himself during his quest for power. After being analyzed by Adam Warlock, it was revealed that Thanos himself actually believed himself to be unworthy of the power of the gauntlet and the gems. Since he was betrayed by Nebula, Thanos actually teams up with Adam Warlock, Doctor Strange, and the Silver Surfer, three of the strongest characters in the Marvel Universe to stop Nebula. Thanos himself preferred the idea of death over imprisonment, and faked his own death, only to be seen hiding out on a farm. declaring to Adam Warlock that he has since abandoned his quest for power, at least for the time being. Based on the events in the comics, we can deduce that the Thanos from the page was motivated by selfish reasons, and his reasoning for killing half of all life in the universe was purely emotional, without any pause or consideration for why he's doing the things he's doing. He was greedy, childish, and selfish, which is a far cry from the Thanos we saw in Infinity War. So Thanos' plan can likely be seen as a failure. He knew he was a genocidal maniac from the get-go, but deep down he saw himself as a savior, and did want to help, in his own twisted way. But one has to stop and wonder, why didn't he just create more resources with the power of the Infinity Stones? He can play with time and distort reality to his will. Instead, he decided that death was the only option. From there, rebuilding would be as easy as 1, 2, 3. Of course, he was horribly mistaken and failed to foresee any of the consequences to suddenly erasing half of a population. Thanos effectively sent humanity and the universe back to the Stone Age, and left them to their own devices. What's worse is that while Thanos wanted things to be fair by wiping out half the population without bias, his final number is probably closer to 75%. When you factor in things like pregnancies and airplanes falling out of the sky, explosions, and so on, Thanos really did a number on the universe. And who's to say how many perished in the fallout from all of that, too? Thanos may be a tactical genius, and was played with conviction by Josh Brolin, but you gotta admit, his plan was not the best and was made to fail. The question that now remains is, how does it all get undone? And by how? We won't have long to wait as Avengers Endgame hits the big screen this April. Fans are waiting with tremendous patience to witness Avengers Endgame. Said to cap off Phase 3 and 11 years of storytelling, the hype for the movie is unreal. But there are tiny clues and mysteries sprinkled through the MCU that could possibly hint at events that will come to pass in Endgame. Let's find out what they are. Ride together, die together. Tony and Cap aren't exactly on talking terms these days in the MCU. The two leaders of their respective branches of the Broken Avengers are complete polar opposites of each other, and that difference in ideology often causes them to clash and butt heads. Once the Sokovia Accords were brought to the table, things really got heated, as we know. But then Zemo had to go and make things even worse for our heroes by successfully causing Tony to hate Steve, which led to Steve and his allies being exiled as wanted criminals. You'll notice that Iron Man and Cap do not share any scenes together in Infinity War, despite being the two symbolic leaders of the Avengers. During the events of Age of Ultron, when discussing the possible outcomes of their upcoming confrontation with the murder bot Tony and Bruce created, Steve reassures Tony that by combining their efforts, they can go through. Tony, being a bit of a pessimist, asks what happens if they fail, to which Steve replies, they'll lose together too. Considering the contracts are up for both Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr., and that the character arcs for Tony and Steve are pretty much over, is it fair to say that this was foreshadowing the demise of both Captain America and Iron Man by the time Phase 3 is over? Narratively, it would make sense, since these two are part of that original team, and it's now time to pass the torch onto someone else. It looks like if one goes, so does the other. Hawkeye. After the events of Age of Ultron, Clint basically went into retirement in order to be with his secret family. Which totally makes sense. The guy has a bow and arrow, and one of the newest recruits can actually play with magic. So it looks like he's a little out of his depth. But when the Avengers started fighting amongst each other, it took no convincing at all, and Clint came out of retirement to help his buddy Steve Rogers. So this is enough information to go on that Clint will do anything for his friends, no matter what his previous commitments or promises were. Many were wondering where Hawkeye was during the events of Infinity War, and we got a passing comment that both he and Scott Lang were on house arrest after the events of Civil War. At least these two got to spend time with their families as opposed to behind bars. Seriously, they dodged a bullet there. But in the Endgame trailer, we suddenly see Clint again. What's caused him to come back into the fight this time? Last time, he bailed on his family to join the fight, but things aren't so simple this time. We know Clint loves his family very much, but Clint isn't going by Hawkeye anymore. In fact, he looks pretty angry. That's likely due to the fact that he now goes by Ronin, and he's on a blood-soaked crusade after witnessing the death of his family in the decimation. Knowing that his family means so much to him that he kept them off the radar, and that the only thing to separate him from them was the Civil War conflict, shows that Clint is absolutely devastated, and likely not the same man we met all those years ago. Tony's clothing. The events Avengers Endgame teaser trailer opened with the extended sequence featuring Tony Stark drifting through space, trying to send a message home to Peter Fox. It's a powerful little scene, and while we know Tony isn't going to die within the first 20 minutes of the movie, he doesn't know that. But the directors did something interesting with the wardrobe that actually harkens back to the first Iron Man film. So, while Jon Favreau's first film didn't intentionally set up Endgame, the Russos definitely appear to be lifting an element from the earlier films, namely Tony's black undershirt. While this doesn't hold any secrets as to what will be happening in this epic finale, it does give some insight to Tony's character. Last time we saw Tony in a similar outfit, he was a prisoner in a cave who thought he may never come home again. It was a huge turning point for Tony Stark, and would be the event that turned him into Iron Man. But in the cave, Tony had nothing except some scraps and Yinsen. Now, once again, Tony is left with nothing, and his fate is up in the air. That set photo. Sometimes the power of Twitter is enough to kick up a huge dust storm and get forums like Reddit so fired up that you'd think that the elixir of life was found nearby. The Russo brothers seemed very aware of this when they took to Twitter on September 19th, 2018, and released a seemingly innocent picture. But the caption is what got everyone freaking out. A simple tease telling fans to look hard was enough for this behind-the-scenes photo of a near-empty set to treat it as if it was the world's hardest game of Where's Waldo. Fans seemingly gravitated towards the latter in the image right away, as it appeared to be staged, and was placed in such a way that it appeared to look like a capital letter A from our vantage point. This naturally led everyone to believe that Annihilation was confirmed to be the title. Next to the A, the support beam for the green screen is positioned to actually appear like a backslash, suggesting there is more than just this A to consider. And as it turns out, there was more. Next to the hypothetical slash, there was an equipment box, and if we let imagination work its magic a bit, and let some assumptions come into play, then the metal framework on the box could fill in the gaps of what could be perceived as an E. Once we see that the picture is spelling out A/E, and that we know the title is Endgame, we can definitely assume that the Russos were pointing us in the right direction with this tease. Endgame. When a property as big as the MCU leaves fans waiting in anticipation for an answer, they tend to get a little antsy, and eventually start theorizing. Thanks to false leaks and the rumor mill, the internet was convinced that the title for the fourth Avengers film would be Annihilation. And considering how Infinity War ended, that actually made a lot of sense. Many people also thought it was going to be Endgame, but the Russo brothers actually denied this title. But as it turns out, Endgame was the actual title. When the trailer debuted, Marvel withheld the title from us in the video title, only showing it to us during the title card at the end of the trailer. Then we realized that we've seen the term Endgame not once, but twice in the MCU so far, and both in Avengers films. The first one links all the way back to Age of Ultron, when Tony points to the sky and declares that space and its infinite unknown is the ultimate endgame for the Avengers. And he's got a point, since Thanos comes from a far-off planet, and brings with him more pain and suffering than any other being in the universe. Tony and the rest of New York, and probably the world, are pretty terrified of space and its aliens after the Battle of New York. And for Tony, defending against space is his sole purpose in life now. Flash forward to Infinity War, and Doctor Strange tells Tony that now they're in the endgame, right before he's decimated, suggesting that everything that comes next is part of the one successful plan Strange foresaw out of millions of failures. So it looks like the Avengers may be on the path to victory, but at what cost? Farmer Thanos. By the end of Infinity War, Thanos could be seen sitting on a porch, watching the sunrise on another fine-looking day. This image struck a chord with many fans, as they believed that this would be our first introduction to what many comic book fans have come to call Farmer Thanos. A teaser for Endgame all but confirmed this, as we get a shot of a scarecrow bearing Thanos' iconic armor, and a brief shot of a mad titan walking through a field. After all that death and destruction, the magnitude of his crusade, Thanos decides to lay low and simply retire into obscurity. This is likely due to the emotional toll his crusade took on him. When confronted with the child Gamora in the Soul Realm, he confirms to her and to the audience that being successful in his mission ultimately cost him everything. So, was it worth it? It's too early to say yet, but it seems that Thanos will be in for a bit of an emotional funk, and that living by himself in isolation serves almost as punishment as much as a reward. It's a given at this point that the Thanos the Avengers will see in Endgame will not be the same person he was during the beginning of Infinity War, and that alone makes us wonder what Thanos' ultimate role in the movie will be. The return of the robot. Right before the decimation, the Avengers were on a desperate mission to either keep Vision from Thanos or to destroy the Mind Stone, something that may have resulted in Vision's death. But the odds were stacked too greatly against their favor, and Thanos ultimately won by ripping the Mind Stone out of Vision's mind. So the Avengers are now without one of their strongest allies. Or are they? This one is more of a theory for the time being, but seeing as how the Red Skull came back in Infinity War, anything seems possible at this point. In Age of Ultron, the murder bot Ultron is trying to transfer his code into the vibranium body that will eventually become Vision's. But Ultron was unsuccessful, only achieving 75% completion. In the end, Vision came to be, coupled with Jarvis, bits of Ultron, and the Mind Stone. Vision is the one to ultimately kill the final Ultron, but we never actually see this happen. So it is entirely possible that this intentional obscuring of information was done for a reason. Is it possible that part of Vision, and therefore Ultron, still exists in the world as something of a backup plan for Vision? While he wouldn't have the stone, it does seem possible that this scene in Ultron was left in place, just in case there was the need to bring back Ultron or Vision to the bigger picture. Passage of time. This detail actually comes from Infinity War itself, and from a passing comment the Russo brothers made at a special Q&A in 2018. Before the decimation happened, which is the official term for the snap if you didn't know, Thor swung into battle and plunged his shiny new axe Stormbreaker into Thanos' big purple chest. The film really hyped up this axe to be the one thing that could take out Thanos, yet as the Mad Titan states, Thor should have aimed for the head, as Thanos ultimately sees his mission through successfully. The film then cuts to everyone dying in a flurry of dust. Thanos flees from the battle, but Thanos was seriously wounded from that wound, so he's likely on death's door, right? Wrong! As it turns out, thanks to the final shot of the film, which saw Thanos sit himself on the porch to watch the sunrise. Despite some scarring on his arm, there's no visible chest wound, or scarring visible. When asked about this at the Collider event, all the Russos would say on the matter is, This leads us to think that the final shot of the film is actually in the endgame timeline of events, which is likely some months after the events of Infinity War at least. After tending to himself and being able to move around at ease, Thanos finally makes good on his word to watch the sunrise, only after he's cured. This, along with the Russo's cryptic reply, is what suggests to us that there is a time jump between Infinity War and Endgame. It's generally assumed that Paul Rudd Scott Lang, the superhero otherwise known as Ant-Man, is set to play a huge part in this year's Avengers Endgame. That being said, the way the movie's first trailer was presented in December of 2018 seemed to suggest he'd emerged late in the movie to save the day. However, there's a theory that he was actually in several of the earlier scenes in the trailer, but hidden from view of the audience. And this video will explain why and how that theory came to be. Scott Lang has officially been a part of the hugely popular Marvel Cinematic Universe since 2015, when he appeared in his first solo movie, the brilliant and hilarious Ant-Man. A lot of people, especially non-comic book fans, were highly skeptical about whether or not the small character would work on the big screen. But the fact is, he's been a lighthearted revelation since the moment he first showed his face in the MCU, even in a franchise that already had lots of humor and is largely aimed at a young audience. He was introduced as a skilled but petty criminal with a heart, who, having recently been released from San Quentin State Prison, where he served a 3-year sentence for burglary, was sneakily manipulated and recruited by Michael Douglas's Hank Pym to steal the Yellow Jacket technology from Corey Stoll's Darren Cross, who had forced him out of his own company. He then re-emerged as one of Steve Rogers' recruits in 2016's Captain America Civil War, to fight alongside Rogers and his anti-Sokovia Accords team of heroes, against Tony Stark and his pro-Accords team. He was briefly mentioned in 2018's Avengers Infinity War by Natasha Romanoff, but he went completely unseen, having been placed on house arrest, enabling him to spend time with his family, in spite of the fact that he broke the law by joining Rogers' cause in the aforementioned Civil War. Most recently, he was seen in 2018's Ant-Man and the Wasp, when he officially joined forces with Evangeline Lilly's Hope Van Dyne, who finally wielded the Wasp technology previously used by her mother, as they worked together to rescue Michelle Pfeiffer's Janet Van Dyne from the quantum realm while fighting off the likes of Hannah John Commons, Ava Starr, and Walton Goggins, Sonny Birch. Of course, the mid-credit scene of that movie revealed that Lang is currently trapped in the quantum realm. He'd gone into the mysterious subatomic plane to harvest quantum energy to use for a variety of purposes, including to help Ava Starr remain stable after what happened to her in the quantum accident that killed her father 2 decades earlier. But Thanos' finger snap caused Hank Pym, Janet Van Dyne, and Hope Van Dyne to turn to dust while he was there, killing the only 3 people who both knew he was in there and who could get him out. Phew, now we're all caught up. No need for the movie rentals. Now, we know he manages to make his way out of there, presumably by going into one of the time vortices that Janet Van Dyne specifically told him to avoid, because he's definitely appearing in this year's Avengers Endgame. We'd already known that for some time, but the recent first trailer for the epic sequel to Infinity War confirmed it, as Lang appeared right at the very end of said trailer, much to the surprise of Chris Evans, Steve Rogers, and Scarlett Johansson's Natasha Romanoff. Lang is expected to be one of the MVPs when it comes to undoing what Thanos did in Avengers Infinity War, and will be a much-needed source of laughs and smiles in a movie that will be dealing with the aftermath of the most devastating incident in the history of the MCU. He's the only surviving hero in the franchise who's familiar with the quantum realm, other than Captain Marvel, but we don't know enough about her yet to speak about that in much detail. Therefore, he'll probably inform the likes of Steve Rogers, Bruce Banner, Tony Stark, and Thor about the fact it can enable people to traverse time, which will allow the heroes to travel back in time to prevent the Mad Titan from ever collecting the Infinity Stones in the first place. And the quantum energy he harvested in Ant-Man and the Wasp could come in handy as well. And he may have actually been in the Avengers Endgame trailer a lot more than you thought. And that's what this particular theory is all about. Ever since he survived the decimation, whether that be because of the fact that he was in the quantum realm or simply because he was part of the lucky 50% who weren't culled by it, it's been clear that Scott Lang would be a hugely important character in the 4th Avengers movie. And the fact that he was essentially used as the zinger of that first trailer really hammered that fact home. He turned up after the trailer revealed the movie's title, outside of what appeared to be the Avengers headquarters in upstate New York, with a very distinctive brown quantum tunnel van that had been used to send him to the quantum realm in that Ant-Man and the Wasp movie scene. He was shouting at a security camera, demanding to be let in, prompting Steve Rogers to question whether the footage was live or a recording. You know, given that everyone believed him to be dead up until that point. What wasn't made clear, however, was exactly when he was arriving. Romanoff went on to confirm the footage was live, and that what they were seeing was in real time at the front door. But Rogers questioning her about it, and the fact the screen had the word archive and the number 1983 on it, has led to a heck of a lot of speculation about the possibility of time travel. It has therefore been suggested by different people that the footage of Lang is either from the current time or somehow from the 1980s. Regardless of that, what is definitely known is that Scott appeared as one of the missing characters in the holographic gallery of missing people in the trailer, along with Peter Parker, who of course turned to dust on Titan, and Shuri, who was actually said to be alive. But could there be more to the situation than that? We believe so. All definitely isn't as it seems in that trailer. The big part of the trailer for Avengers Endgame is Natasha Romanoff explaining what happened at the end of Avengers Infinity War. The fact that Thanos succeeded in wiping out half the universe using the Infinity Gauntlet to simply snap his fingers, and will it to be so, while Bruce Banner looks despondently at the gallery of missing heroes. But this is surely misleading. Romanoff's speech also overlaps a shot of Steve Rogers, who along with Banner, is already fully and painfully aware of the tragedy that occurred thanks to the actions of the prune-chinned Mad Titan. Therefore, surely there is a mysterious person off camera having the situation explained to him or her. Someone to whom the whole thing would be a mystery, and who's a better potential candidate for that role than Scott Lang? Nobody would be the answer to that question. Absolutely nobody. It would be pretty pointless explaining the situation to individuals like James Rhodes, Rocket, or Okoye, for example, who were all present in the Battle of Wakanda when characters they knew started disappearing. And although Tony Stark was off the planet when the decimation took effect, he's all too aware of it, given that 5 out of the other 6 people he was with turned to dust. Clint Barton might feel like he's an option to have the whole thing explained to him, given that he was absent from the fighting in Avengers Infinity War, but the fact he's believed to have watched his wife and kids disappear before his eyes would rule him out as someone who needs what happened explaining to him. With that in mind, it's extremely reasonable to theorize that in typical Marvel Studios fashion, the Avengers Endgame trailer isn't presented in chronological order, and the end scene in which Scott Lang appears is actually a scene from the beginning of the actual movie, just before he has the decimation explained to him. It's also reasonable to assume that Scott Lang's appearance as part of the missing gallery could have been edited into the trailer, but not appear in the movie itself, because if he's made his return by the time the gallery is shown, he would no longer be considered a missing person, obviously. Marvel Studios is known to mislead fans with their trailers, even going as far to include complex CGI that ultimately doesn't make it into the final movie. Remember how we all thought the Hulk would be fighting in Wakanda, even though he didn't re-emerge in Avengers Infinity War after he was brutally beaten down by Thanos in the movie's opening scenes on board the Asgardian refugee vessel? It would undoubtedly make a lot of sense for the movie to open with Lang escaping the quantum realm, likely via the usage of a time vortex, then for his arrival at the Avengers' upstate New York base serving as the scene in which both him and the audience are given a thorough explanation at what's happened to MCU Earth since Thanos erased half of all life in the universe. To put it bluntly, there's simply no better character to serve as an audience surrogate to have the information relayed to, because he's missed out on the direct aftermath of the decimation in exactly the same way that we all have. The same amount of time will have passed for him since the decimation as both you and I. There's also a sub-theory that suggests Rogers and Romanoff were surprised to see Lang outside their base, because he was already back with them. But what exactly could that mean? This year's highly anticipated Captain Marvel movie will introduce Skrulls to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we could see them start attempting to infiltrate the ranks of the heroes of the franchise on screen as early as Avengers Endgame. Could it be that Scott Lang had already returned to the real world, and was in the next room to Rogers and Romanoff, but a Skrull, incorrectly believing Lang to still be trapped in the quantum realm, was trying to trick them into believing it was actually Paul Rudd's character? It would certainly explain Rogers and Romanoff's confusion. As interesting as that idea is, it's needlessly complicating things though, and in all fairness, it's probably a load of nonsense. Additionally, there have been several theories about Scott Lang being present at past MCU events that we didn't think he was involved in, thanks to his ability to shrink to tiny size as Ant-Man and remain relatively hidden. And it could be that he's literally in the trailer for Avengers Endgame, but too small to see. But again, this is just a silly extension of the theory that he was in the scenes shown in the trailer, but simply out of shot. It should be noted, of course, that all of this speculation distracts from what is undoubtedly a much bigger point when it comes to Avengers Endgame. And it's the fact that all of this happens very early on in the movie. Fans have actually theorized that the trailer doesn't show anything beyond the first 20 minutes. And if indeed Scott Lang's arrival is the catalyst for the explanation of everything that's happened since the previous movie, that would certainly make a lot of sense. The only part of the trailer that people are claiming could possibly come later in the movie is the reveal of Jeremy Renner's Clint Barton as the sword-wielding Ronin, something that will see Natasha Romanoff travel to Japan to recruit her old friend to join the other heroes in the fight back against Thanos. If that particular theory